Hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon when you are watching this video lecture. After the completion of discussion related to two heads of incomes, salaries and income from house property, let us move on to another very important head of income, that is profits and gains of business or profession, what we popularly call as PGBP. And this is one of the biggest heads of income in terms of the number of sections also, even importance wise, not only in examinations but also in real life. Most of the practice that chartered accountants will really do as a service to their clients will be in relation to this head of income. We can understand the nature of this head of income before we enter into the provisions part of it. If we observe the head of income of salaries, most of the provisions related to them are very straightforward and mechanical in nature. In other words, even if you really write a program in a computer and input the data, automatically the computer also can calculate how much will be the taxable salary and exemptions also according to the input. Very easily, all of them can be calculated because most of them are mechanical provisions. There are set standards which are very fixed and rigid in the chapter of salaries, various exemptions in relation to allowances, as well as not only allowances but also the retirement benefits are there. Also, perquisites valuation is also there. But once again, if you observe the overall way of solving the questions in the head of income salaries, it is mostly there is an input and you have to apply the provision, that is a process, and output is very evident and which is more, I would say, mechanical in nature. But of course, mechanical does not mean without knowing the provisions we can just directly calculate. When I say mechanical, even if the same thing is given to a computer, it can also do. That's what I meant to say. So practically, for anybody who earns a salary, imagine in a real life situation, for examination, every chapter is important. Of course, we don't have to discriminate the chapters and heads of income from examination point of view, but from reality point of view, salaries is a chapter. Of course, there are crores of people who earn salaries in this country, and definitely few lakhs of them will earn taxable level of salary, and it is all known. Everything is there. How much is their basic, how much is their DA, how much is their HRA, how much are the other allowances that they are receiving. All are facts. Mostly everything is black and white, very clear. And what is the treatment of each of them also is very clear in the Income Tax Act. Very clearly, those all have been prescribed in the provisions of the Income Tax Act as far as various items related to the head of salaries is concerned. And another point related to salaries, as we already know, this is only applicable to individuals only, because others type of SSCs cannot have any salary income. So naturally the scope is limited. Yes, there will be too many people. At a broader level, if you see in the real life, there will be only two heads of income mostly applicable. One is salaries, one is PGBP. There will be people who are working for others, then they get salary, then that income is taxable under the head of salaries. And there are other categories of people who have self-employment or they do their own business or profession. Then their income comes under PGBP. So at a broader level, the regular routine incomes that people earn practically will be only of two cases, two major sources, either salaries or PGBP. But of course, since there are other possibilities also, like what we have observed in the head of income from house property, which talks about the taxability of the annual value of the properties held by the SSE, whether rent is received or not. If it is received, anyway it is taxable. But even if it is not received also, still on a notional basis, income from house property becomes taxable. But that is only for how many people? Imagine even people at a middle class level having two houses. Both are self-occupied also. Still there is nothing that is taxable. In fact, the head of income from house property, if you look at the aggregate amounts at a country level, negative amounts will be more than the positive amounts. Most probably. We don't know the details. Statistically, positive amounts will be very less. Who is going to declare all the house properties and pay tax on them? Very, very rare. But everybody will claim deduction under 24B because most of the houses that people purchase will be by taking housing loans, and interest paid on such housing loans is allowed as deduction. So from a government or revenue point of view, if you observe, income from house property is not going to add much of revenue as a head of income. But for SSEs, definitely it has a benefit one way, where it gives deduction for interest on the borrowed capital for the purpose of construction, acquisition, repairs, renewal, etc. of the properties. So, practically the percentage of people who will really declare positive income from house property could be very minimum. And even those who declare income from house property possibly might declare mostly negative income. But even then, how many people will be there having own property and getting some rental income? Almost very, very less percentage of the population, we can say. So, yes, in real sense, though there are definitely lakhs of people who might be attracted with this head of income, but definitely not crores of people. So many of them will not come under this purview. Salaries is not like that. Everybody, whether they have taxable income exceeding the basic exemption limit or not, is a different story. But as a nature, what type of income people earn, either salary or PGBP, income from house property, very few privileged people who own properties can have that source of income. First of all, taxability and all is a separate story, which we know already according to those heads of income how the taxability arises. And we have seen the unique features of these two heads also already, as salaries is applicable to individuals only, income from house property is not applicable only to individuals. In fact, all the other heads of incomes other than salaries are applicable to everybody, including individuals. But salaries is only applicable to individuals. That uniqueness is there. And what is the uniqueness of income from house property? That is a notional head of income. That is the uniqueness of this. Not necessarily the income is really received in order that to be subjected to tax under the head of income from house property. But now when we look at PGBP, that is the profits and gains of business or profession, there will be so many people, crores and crores of them, who are doing small businesses to big businesses to professionals, and most importantly, other than individuals, mostly means all the other type of organizations like partnership firms or LLPs or companies, all of them will do business only naturally. All of them will have business. So, many SSEs who are not individuals also majorly will have the purview of this PGBP head of income. So, if you take corporate tax, for example, corporate tax is the tax that is applicable to the companies. Could be 25% or 30% as the case may be. But that is calculated on what? On what income of the companies? Companies will not have salary income. They may have income from house property, but that is also very rare. Not necessarily every company will have that. Those companies which are having some property, that too as a stock in trade, then only they will have income from house property. Otherwise, income from house property is not something that companies normally face or have. But what do they have majorly? When nothing is mentioned, the company is having profit. Any company has a profit. What is that profit? That is taxable under this head of PGBP. That is why the name itself is profits and gains of business or profession. So the point here to note is the scope of this head of income is very vast. In reality also, and even from the tax law point of view, from examination point of view also, it has a very broader scope and vast number of sections and provisions. But having said the vastness of this chapter, let us also look at the good news. The good news is, this is only head of income, or to some extent other than capital gains, this is the only head of income where we can apply some logic. So this is a logical head of income, not purely like by-hearting type of provisions like salaries. How much is the exemption for gratuity? There is no logic in that. However intelligent you are, you will never be able to solve that question until and unless you know what is the provision under section 1010 which exempts gratuity, what it says, what facts are there in the situation, apply the provision in those facts, and then you get the answer. No option. That is the nature of it. So salaries requires tremendous memory. That is the nature of the chapter. Income from house property, because of the small nature of it, it has only very few provisions, but still those are also very specific and straightforward. You have to remember them. There is no logic much involved in that. If at all there is a procedure for computation of gross annual value, you have to just follow that. That's all. There is no question of why when it comes to salaries also, income from house property also, at many instances. Children education allowance is exempt. Only this much. Why? Only 100 rupees per month per child. Why? No answer for it. Law said that. Like that, gratuity maximum limit exemption is only 20 lakhs. Why? We don't know. That is what government said. As simple as that. So the point is, when we have the provisions related to the other heads of income, like salaries or income from house property, those are, I would say, more rigid in nature. They are rigid in nature. Relatively, we have to just follow them. We don't have any much option there. That rigidity is a common point almost for both the heads of incomes that we have discussed so far. Why 24A gives only 30% deduction? Only 30%. Why means government said 30%, that's all. Like that, why there is a limit on interest on borrowed capital deduction for 24B for self-occupied property, only 2 lakhs. Why? No answer for all these things. Like this, every provision, whatever we have studied, understood, interpreted, applied, remembered so far, are very rigid, and they have to be remembered in the same way, and they have to be applied also in the same way as prescribed by law and as we have studied earlier. Municipal taxes have to be available as deduction only on payment basis. That's it. That's what mentioned in the law. You have to follow that. So that rigidity is there almost in every provision in that. Very rarely you see any logical thing in those two chapters. There are a couple of them, but mostly, once again, they also fall within the framework of the law, framework of the provision or section that restricts its application only in that particular way. That is the nature of those heads of income. But the good news now is, in the chapter of PGBP, I don't think we can just get away with this chapter only with logic. No, I am not telling that. I am not telling that. But with logic, we can definitely understand most of the provisions in PGBP. So here also there will be rigid provisions. For example, depreciation under section 32 will have certain percentages mentioned. It will tell so and so asset will be depreciated at 10%, so and so asset will be depreciated at, let us say, 30%. Then we cannot say why and all. We have to just know that. That will just tell us what is the percentage of rate of depreciation applicable under section 32. That is a rigid thing, no doubt. But accepting certain very specific areas, I am talking about in general, the nature of the chapter itself is logical. Nature of the chapter itself is not purely based on memory. Like salaries, you cannot just by heart the provisions, apply them and get the marks here. We need the common sense. We need a little bit of rational and logical thinking. And not only that, we need definitely a little bit of accounting knowledge. Accounting does not mean you have to pass journal entries and all. No. But we should definitely know what happens in accounting. Basic things like debit, credit. We should know definitely. And most importantly, because we are talking about the profits and gains of business or profession, we should definitely know what is a profit and loss account. That is going to be our guiding factor for this entire chapter. Mostly. So how a profit and loss account looks like. What will be there in the profit and loss account? Logical things we should know. So these are the requirements of this chapter. In a nutshell, there is no one specific thing that is numerical based or number based restriction, except for sections like 32, where there is a restriction on percentage of depreciation that can be allowed. Other than that, mostly the provisions all will be open, not very rigid like others. Why is that also we can understand. For example, when you say PGBP, a normal Kirana shop also, that guy will be chargeable to tax under PGBP. He will also have a profit and loss account. Reliance Industries also will have profit and loss account. The biggest company also will have a profit and loss account. Smallest possible trader also will have a profit and loss account. A small lawyer or a chartered accountant or a doctor also will have their own income and expenditure account, whatever the name you call it. But the point is, the scale of these things cannot be defined. The scale means the numbers here cannot be defined, unlike salaries. Salaries gratuity, 20 lakhs, that's it. Or is there some big person who, let us say, has retired from a very high position, might have received some 1 crore gratuity also, possible. Still, the law says no, Baba. No, we have to get an exemption of maximum 20 lakhs only. There ends the matter. But definitely, even there also, there will not be a person who receives 5,000 crores gratuity. That much is like unimaginable. Maybe some top employee might have received some 1 crore, 2 crores, 3 crores gratuity, fine, but government never bothered about that. And it said, irrespective of whoever that employee may be, maximum amount of gratuity cannot exceed exemption at 20 lakhs. That's what they said. But that is reasonable amount, right? 20 lakhs is not such small amount also. Same way, for leave salary, 3 lakhs only is the maximum amount of exemption that can be claimed. That's all. Where the salaries chapter was open-ended, without any monetary restrictions particularly, in the valuation of perquisites, it was open-ended. There, if you remember, rent-free accommodation is valued, let us say, for example, on the basis of 15% of salary. So salary is open-ended. No amount given there. That depends upon reality. But where there are restrictions on the exemptions, etc., the amounts are very much fixed and rigid. The provisions are very much fixed and rigid. Sometimes the amounts are there, sometimes like HRA, there are no amounts. But still, the calculation is very, very rigid in nature in those areas of the chapters, both salaries and to some extent income from house property also. But PGBP does not have that facility. Why? Because simple common sense. A person who has a PGBP income of 10 lakhs rupees also will be there, and a person who has a person in the sense, again in this case company, who has a PGBP income of, let us say, 40,000 crores in a particular year. That is the profit of one big company. 40,000 crores also comes under the same head. For 4 lakhs person also comes under the same head. So the law cannot have different provisions for them. Yeah, it may give some relaxation to the small person, but that is not from the computation point of view. That will be given for procedural things. But as far as the computation of profits and gains of business or profession is concerned, it is one and the same for anybody, biggest possible industrialist or industry or a company to a small trader. For everybody it is the same. So that is why this chapter goes with logic rather than just numbers. Numbers will be there, but less in number. Mostly the provisions contained in this chapter will have some logic in that. What is the advantage of logic is, if you understand that, you don't have to buy hard that. For example, let us say there is sales for a particular organization 10 lakhs rupees. That is sales. Don't tell me trading account and all. We don't distinguish all those things. Trading, profit and loss account, all are same. That is only for presentation differences. Trading account is different, gross profit, net profit, blah, blah, blah. Like that, any different presentations can happen. Presentations are many. There can be a trading account and profit and loss account. There can be a manufacturing account, a trading account and profit and loss account. There can be income and expenditure account. If it is a not-for-profit organization, there can be an income statement for companies under Schedule 3 of the Companies Act. So, presentation is different. Banks will present their income statement in their own way. Insurance companies will present their income statement in their own way. Presentation is not what we are bothered about. In Income Tax Act, always we have to keep in mind, substance matters. Presentation is more about the form. Form can change from case to case, type of organization to organization. So substance is definitely this one, which of course will be sticking to the basics always. Like a T form, normal P&L account. Sales is there, 10 lakhs rupees. And some expenses are there. We are talking about a small businessman. What expenses he might have? He has some staff. So definitely he will pay some salaries to his staff. So some 2 lakhs rupees, let us say he has paid salaries. And of course he is a trader. So definitely he has to do some purchases. Right? Purchases are there, let us say, of 4 lakhs rupees. And other expenses, something like, let us say, rent and all he pays. So, rent, let us say he pays around 50,000 rupees in the rented premises where he is running the business. Like this, he'll have so many expenses, right? Can we list all of them? In reality also, is it possible to list down all the expenses that people will incur? Not practical. They will incur electricity expenses, they have to pay the power bill, they have to bear some expenses related to, let us say, entertainment or like normal office expenses, chai samosa type of expenses, and expenses something like related to repairs of the premises. Numerous expenses will be there in reality. That cannot be just outlined here. Printing and stationery expenses, telephone expenses, technology expenses, depreciation. So many expenses will be there, definitely. So let us say in this particular case, depreciation is 10,000. Like this, lot of expenses are there. Just for convenience purposes, let us say all other expenses put together, we are calling them as, let us say, other expenses. There may be many types of expenses. So, just for convenience purposes, let us say all other expenses put together are 40,000 rupees. Assume there are no stocks and all, but of course there will be opening stock also, closing stock also if he is a trader. Even for a manufacturer also there will be inventories. For simplicity purpose, let us not get into that. We will anyway have to deal with those things when we solve the questions. So for simplicity purposes, let us say stocks are not there, or even if they are there, they are equal. Opening stock is equal to closing stock, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't have an impact on the profit. So now what is the profit here, which is earned by this particular businessman or a trader, whoever he is. So 10 lakhs rupees is the total of the credit side. That is the total of credit side. And what is the total of the debit side? 4 plus 2 plus 50 plus 50, around 7 lakhs. So that means there is a net profit that he has made of 3 lakhs rupees. This is a normal simple P&L. Anyway, anybody's P&L it could be. What is a big company? That P&L also ultimately will come here only. Definitely there will be some revenue. Definitely there will be some expenses. That is common. That is not going to change. And to the size of the company. The zeros, how many zeros we are going to add after this, that might change. Otherwise, there is not going to be any difference in the essence of how profit of an organization is calculated. It is a way always we calculate profit. Revenue minus expenditure is profit. But now, when we say profits and gains of business or profession, PGBP, What is the taxable income here? Is it 10 lakhs? Is it taxable income? Can we call 10 lakhs as income? Answer is no. It cannot be called as income. That is not income, first of all. If at all you want to call it revenue, we can call it revenue, but law never defined that also. But definitely it is not income. What is income? Income is something which is arrived at after reducing all the expenses from the revenue. So what is PGBP here is not 10 lakhs. It will be only 3 lakhs. That is the taxable profits and gains of business or profession for this person. There ends the matter. Then why do we need 189 pages chapter for all this nonsense? Already we know how to calculate profits. We know accounting. We can just prepare a P&L account and find out profits. And that's it. We have PGBP. Is it the case? No. If that was the case, there is nothing for us to learn on this chapter. Then what is there for us to do here in this particular chapter of PGBP under Income Tax Act? This is the most crucial point. First and foremost thing what we have to identify is, though we require accounting knowledge, we definitely need a little bit of basic accounting knowledge, no doubt about it. But the accounting profit and tax profits are not one and the same. In other words, when we say PGBP, it can never be equal to the profit that has been calculated in accordance with accounting principles normally. So how to calculate profit then? We have to use PGBP provisions. According to the tax provisions, how to calculate profit is the main point in this chapter. Then we may think that means we have to restructure this entire P&L account. Not necessarily. What the law will tell. What is this chapter all about? This chapter is all about, once again, two things. One, that is something that is taxable. In that case, we call it as sales. Let us call it as revenue. What are all the things which should be included in the revenue? What are all the things that can be reduced as expenses? Remaining is profit or loss. Simple. That's what is this, right? Revenue minus expenses. That is remaining is profit or loss. This entire chapter is based on only this logic. And if we know this, hopefully we should know this already, we can easily understand various provisions of this chapter. So what is revenue means what? What are the taxable items? Those all will be mentioned in charging section of this chapter, that is section 28. Oh, big list is there. We don't actually need to go through all of that also. Some of the special items we can definitely touch and look at. So, what are taxable things? What is the scope of this head of income, which will be considered as income, which will be considered as taxable under section 28, is going to be first taken as positive item. Practically, that will not be a big difficulty for us in the problem solving also, because those are the things which will be on the credit side. Which are related to this head of income, those only we have to take as PGBP. If they are not related to PGBP, then they should be taken to other heads of incomes. So, what are taxable things is not a really big deal, though we will look at it. It will be very evident. Simply, the sales revenue is what is taxable. And there are some special cases which we will also see. Some other items also might be taxable, and there also, as I said, you don't need to buy hard them, you just need to know, okay, this is also taxable, okay, that is also taxable, okay, this is also taxable. That's all. It is all about just nodding our head and identifying that, okay, most of the things, anything is taxable, simple. That's not a big deal. Then what is the big deal about? Big deal is all about this. Section 30 to 37 will tell us what are the expenses which are all allowed as deductions. That is a major point. Okay, they will tell some of the expenses are allowed as deduction, that's all, as if it's a new invention. But they are expenses. Anyway, they will be allowed as reduction. Nothing special will be there in that. In fact, in most of the cases, nothing special will be there. Expenses are expenses. Expenses are allowed as reduction. For example, if you take section 30 or 31 related to the rent, repairs, etc. of building or machinery, if you took here debit side 50,000, you have debited to the P&L account. Was that 50,000 allowed as reduction while calculating net profit? Yes. After deducting 50,000 only, we got net profit of 3 lakhs, right? So this rent was allowed as reduction or not? Yes, it was already allowed as reduction. But you know what? We have a section for it. We have a section 30 which will tell that you can take this as reduction. Fantastic. My point is, why do we need that? It is common sense. When it is a regular normal expenditure, all that we need to know is some section number, that's all. Without knowing section 30 also, you know that rent can be debited to P&L. But by knowing section 30, nothing new you are knowing, that is allowed as reduction is what you are knowing. Like this, many items will be there which are specific and direct, which we know already. All that the law tells is a kind of authorization to allow them as reduction, that's all. But major difference between accounting profits and tax profits, that means PGBP, these two are not same, never will be same. Rent is not a problem, purchases is not a problem, salaries paid to the people is not a problem. Depreciation is a problem, because depreciation normally for accounting purposes is calculated in accordance with accounting standard 10. Don't worry, I don't know accounting standard 10 and all. You know that already. Whatever depreciation you are already calculating, whatever depreciation you know how to calculate, that is accounting standard 10 only, nothing different. Only point is numbers we don't know. We know already what is the treatment. That is depreciation. Depreciation, as we might already know, we should already know in accounting, can be calculated by using straight line method or written down value method or sum of the years of the digits method or actual usage. Like this, so many possibilities are there. All of them are allowed in accounting standard 10 also. So depreciation is calculated for a normal businessman also in accordance with accounting standard 10. Of course, there are no rates prescribed there, but mostly for accounting purposes, the major point related to depreciation will be the useful life of the asset. Mostly. That is the useful life of the asset is the biggest factor. Cost of the asset, of course, is a fact. That is already known. That is not going to be different from accounts to tax. If a trader has purchased a machinery for 50,000, that is the cost of the machinery. Accounts also it is 50,000 only, tax also it is 50,000 only. That is a fact. Fact cannot change. But what can change? On that 50,000 worth of machinery, how do you calculate depreciation under accounting? That can be calculated mostly by taking the useful life of that asset. Though there are many other factors, major factor is that, useful life. On the other hand, particularly for companies, the depreciation rates are prescribed by the Companies Act 2013. So Companies Act prescribes the depreciation rates for companies. Those will be different. Income Tax Act prescribes depreciation rates under section 32. So many rates are there. What are those? We will learn definitely. But point to note here is at a conceptual level, the depreciation rates prescribed in the Companies Act and the depreciation rates prescribed in the Income Tax Act are not one and the same. They are different. So what happens? What you debited in the P&L account could be on the basis of accounting, which is okay. We are not telling it is a crime or something. But when we want to calculate PGBP, when this is our objective, this depreciation cannot be taken. No. We have to calculate depreciation according to section 32 of the Income Tax Act, which gives us the way of calculating depreciation. That is when accounting profits and tax profits will not be same. One of the major reasons. Most of the cases, like other general expenses, regular expenses, there will not be much difference. That is okay. Mostly they are okay. And by the way, if accounting profit and tax profits are equal, as I said already, there is nothing for us to do in this chapter. If these are all exactly according with the Income Tax Act, also this P&L account, what is there for you to calculate? Already 3 lakhs is there, then that will not become tax subject, that is accounting subject, which you already know how to prepare a P&L account and how to calculate profit of an organization. But that is not the purpose, or that is not the objective of this chapter. Here, we have certain items which are specifically taxable in this head only. They have to be taken into consideration according to charging section 28. And there are expenses which are specifically allowed as deduction under section 32, 37. So many are there. 30, 31, 32, 35, and so many 35 series is there. And then 36 and 37 are general deductions mostly. But there are so many deductions which are specified by the Income Tax Act. Income Tax Act will tell. For example, somewhere in section 36, one of the subsections, it will tell, okay sir, bad debts is allowed as deduction. Section 36 tells that. Is it something new to us? Is bad debts not debited to P&L account normally if it is there? Yes, it would have been already debited. But only what we know now, bad debts is allowed as deduction under Income Tax Act, under so and so section, that's all. Like this, many items will be commonsensical, logical, accounting-based knowledge will be enough for understanding whether they are allowed as deduction or not. When we say allowed as deduction in this chapter, we are understanding that could be either an expenditure or sometimes it could be a loss also. Bad debts, for example, cannot be called as an expenditure, it is a loss. This differentiation we should already know. If not, know it now. What is the difference between expense and loss? Expense is something which is incurred for the purpose of earning revenue. Why you have incurred expenditure on purchases? Because of that only you could sell goods. Otherwise you cannot sell goods. Why you paid salaries to your staff? Because of that only people are working and you are able to achieve some revenue. So the expenditure, whatever is incurred, in general, will be towards earning the revenue. Then you cannot say what is the contribution of having chai samosa and showing it as expenditure. Not required. Such type of questions will not have any answer. Why? Because, yeah, that is also adding to the motivation of the people, workers, and the owner or the customers, which might add to revenue. You may not quantify it always. So we don't have to go into such type of thoughts. But nature of expenditure is what? Whenever you say expenditure, when you pay rent, when you pay electricity bill, telephone expenses, printing and stationery, salaries, wages, entertainment expenses, any other miscellaneous expenses. Why these expenses are all incurred generally? Ultimately with an objective of earning income, and while earning income, these expenses are incurred. In the process of earning income, the expenses are incurred. Loss is not like that. Loss is incidental to the business. It is not something which is required to earn the income. No. You don't need bad debts to earn income. Nobody is going to plan, okay, let me have a lot of bad debts so that I'll earn more income. No, it is not going to happen like that. Bad debts will happen which are incidental to the operations of sales. Then the sales which are credit sales converted into debtors. And the debtors, some of them might give us bills receivable. Some of them might get honored. Some of them might get dishonored. And then some of the debtors will become bad debts according to the situation. This much process is there. And this is all not happening to earn revenue. This is happening after earning revenue, by the way. So the loss is not something which is incurred for the purpose of earning revenue. It is incurred as an incidental item. Incidentally it has occurred. Just like that, accidentally, incidentally. But that is also common. Not that it is very surprise. Oh, suddenly we know now only we have bad debts. Every business will have some bit of bad debts. But those are not planned. Or those are not the things which are required to earn the revenue. Those will also happen incidental to the business. Let us say some business has lost some stock because of a fire accident. Can we say that as an expenditure? No. That is not an expenditure. That is a loss because you don't need fire accidents to earn revenue. Fire accident happened, because of that a loss happened. Incidentally, accidentally that happened. So that is a major difference between expenses and losses. But point here is we don't distinguish. All this distinction is for accounting purposes. They are also only for ultimately having some conceptual clarity. But what is the distinction in accounting also? Is there any difference in treatment of expenditure and losses in accounting? No. Debit all expenses and losses. All are debited. That's all. Ultimately, the debits of all those things will end up in P&L account. So, accounting also, income tax also. There is no substance level distinction between expenditure and losses, but in reality, there is a lot of difference between them. That has to be conceptually just understood. Are we going to apply it? Not much. We don't differentiate much between them because at the end of the day, both are deductions. For us, main point is, are they allowed as deduction or not? That is the only thing. Deduction for us means debit side of P&L account. That should be there in mind. Earlier, in the chapters of salaries, deductions were there. But those are not on the basis of some reality. Those are some numbers once again. 50,000 standard deduction, go to hell. That's all. Beyond that, you will not get any deduction. And same way, entertainment allowance deduction, that too for government employees, that too for a maximum of 5,000 rupees. That's all. If somebody received more than that, he will not get any deduction more than that. Same way, for professional tax, though there is no limit prescribed in the Income Tax Act, since there is a limit in the Constitution of India, approximately around 2,500 can be restricted as deduction. That is a very small amount, professional tax deduction. That's all. Only 3 deductions are there in the entire salaries. Only 3. Look at income from house property. Municipal tax is allowed as deduction because it is a negative item which is reduced from the gross annual value. We can call it as deduction, definitely. It has that characteristic of being called as a deduction, no problem. Why is it allowed as deduction? Because it is a real expenditure. It is an expenditure for the owner of the property. If he pays, then only we are allowing it as deduction. But we are not allowing it on accrual basis. We are allowing it on payment basis because it is payable to the government. So, that is a deduction. After that, you have only 2 more deductions. 24A, nothing is there, 30% of net annual value. Whatever that amount may be, just a number is given in the Act. Y and all will not happen. 24B, interest on borrowed capital. Some calculation has to happen and that will be allowed as deduction. So, these deductions allowed earlier are very limited, what I mean to say, and what we have to understand. There is nothing else beyond it what can be allowed as deduction on reality for both the heads of income. Nothing else. Salaries has only 3, 16 1 year, 16 2, 16 3. Done. That's all. Or sir, this guy suddenly had some lot of medical expenditure in 1 year. He got some good salary, top guy, some big company, high level employee is earned some 15-20 lakhs rupees of salary in the year. But unfortunately, because of not having some insurance policy, he had to incur some medical expenditure of 4-5 lakhs. See, if you just observe that logically or passionately or human angle, sentimental angle, अरे बेचारा इतना expenditure he has incurred and should it be allowed as deduction or not? Should be allowed, no? ऐसा लगता है हमको. We feel like that. But point is, no. When the law says there is a deduction, there is a deduction. Otherwise, there is no deduction. So that is where we have to be very clear. In salaries, there are only and only 3 deductions. Remaining are there. Those are exemptions, not deductions. I hope the difference is already known to us. 1010, 1010A, 1010AA, 1010B, 1010C, 10.5, 10.7. All these things are exemptions, which are also there in the head of salaries. But deductions are only and only 3. And reality does not matter. Only the law prescribed amounts only will matter. Same with income from house property. Municipal taxes, yes, it is a real item, reality. 30% of net annual value is a standard amount. Interest on borrowed capital is a real item. So here, at least amount-wise restrictions are not there in that head of income. That is improvement from salaries. Now further improvement from there to PGBP is deduction. Is deduction, it is allowed as deduction. So here, it will be not about how much is allowed as deduction. It will also there. It will also have its own place like 32 and all. Particulars are there in certain sections. But in general, I am telling, today what I am talking about is not provisions. the general substance of the PGBP chapter, if we can catch the pulse of it, if we can catch the undercurrent logic that goes in this chapter becomes very easier. In spite of having 189 pages also, even if it has 240 pages also, it doesn't matter. We can approach it very easily if we catch that logic, if we catch that undercurrent concept that is applied in this chapter. Undercurrent concept is simple, it is not complicated, but only point is we have to always keep that in mind. We have to always think in that line. We should not get confused. We should not apply one provision in another place. These are the only things that happen. We should not mess the provisions up. That care has to be taken. And when will that be effectively implemented is when we understand the simple concept of this entire chapter is, because PGBP is nothing but the revenues which are taxable under section 28 minus of certain expenses or losses which are deductible under section 30 to 37. So many provisions are there like that. According to them, whatever deduction is available, we give the deduction. If deduction is not available, we will say we will not give deduction, as simple as that. So when we say 30 to 37, certain items are deductible, automatically that also means certain items are not deductible. So admissibility of deduction, inadmissibility of deduction, both are two sides of the same coin. Just to take an example, let us say, in this example, the depreciation as per accounting, whatever this particular businessman has done was 10,000 according to their own calculation, maybe used on the basis of useful life and all. But after applying section 32 and after doing so many calculations under section 32, we came to know that according to Income Tax Act, the depreciation is only 8,000. So what happened now? What happened? This 10,000 cannot be allowed as deduction. Only 8,000 can be allowed as deduction. So what can we automatically say from this? 2,000 is inadmissible as deduction. That is all coming from the same. So 8,000 is allowed as deduction. 2,000 is not allowed as deduction. But already they have debited 10,000 rupees on the debit side of P&L, because of which the net profit according to the accounts was 3 lakhs. If instead of 10,000, if you debited 8,000, how much would have been the profit? How much would have been the profit? That would have been 3 lakhs 2,000 instead of 3 lakhs. So what is PGBP under Income Tax Act now? Not 3 lakhs. It is 3 lakhs 2,000. That is the adjustment we are supposed to do here. This is just one of them. This is just tip of the iceberg. But like this, concept is same. Concept is always the same. We know certain things which are deductible according to sections ranged from 30 to 37, and according to the same sections, naturally some other item will not be deductible. In this case, 8,000 is deductible, 2,000 is not deductible. That is clear. So this deduction allowability or disallowability is the crux of this entire chapter, as simple as that. So this entire chapter we are going to learn, understand, interpret, apply whether a particular deduction is available or not according to Income Tax Act. Whether it is debited to P&L account or not, that is our question. This is our question. Answer is 3 lakhs is not the profit. That is profit according to accounts. Let it be happy, no problem. But according to us, according to Income Tax Act, 3 lakhs 2,000 is the profit. So what is PGBP? 3 lakhs 2,000. That is our answer. So P&L account will be our input. And what process we have to do? Whether the P&L account has taken any incomes which are not chargeable to tax under 28. We have to check that. Whether P&L account has taken any expenses which are not deductible under section 30 to 37. We have to check that. Same way, reverse also. Whether P&L account has ignored anything which is supposed to be chargeable to tax under section 28 but not included in the credit side of P&L account. We have to check that. Same way, we have to also check whether P&L account has given a lesser amount of deduction or lesser debit when compared to the allowability of the same under Income Tax Act. We have to check that. So 4 and 4 possibilities only are there here. If you observe, this entire chapter completely revolves around 4 things only. This is the logic. If you understand, this chapter is done. What are the 4 possibilities? From a revenue point of view, revenue, which is chargeable to tax but not included, which is chargeable to tax but not included on the credit side, or let us say not credited. Let us make it more technically clear. Chargeable to tax but not credited. Then not chargeable to tax but credited. Not chargeable to tax where? Under PGBP. Maybe they are chargeable to tax elsewhere, but they are credited to P&L unnecessarily. We have to adjust them. Expenses. Let us say deductible expenses but not debited. If deductible expenses are debited, there is no problem. But deductible expenses are not debited, then there is a problem. We have to adjust that. Not deductible expenses are there, non-deductible expenses, but they are debited. Then there is a problem. These 4 are the only things that we are supposed to know in this entire chapter. But the point is, right side is accounting. Not credited, credited, not debited, debited. These are all realities which will be given in the P&L account as a problem for us. But left side, who will tell? Chargeable to tax, who will tell? That accounts will not tell. That this chapter, what we are going to study, will tell us. Section 28 will tell us whether a particular item is subjected to tax in this chapter or not. And otherwise also we can have common sense. For example, there is on the credit side of P&L, just for example, let us say on the credit side of P&L, there is something like interest income also. Interest income is there. Some 10,000 rupees. P&L account is credited with that. Example I am telling. But that is wrong, no? In accounts it is not wrong. Absolutely it is correct. But in income tax it is not correct. Why? Because interest income is not subjected to tax in PGBP. It is subjected to tax under income from other sources. If there is anything like that, which is not chargeable to tax under PGBP, but credited, we have to remove that. We have to adjust that. Or on the other side, certain items are chargeable to tax but not credited. We have to adjust that. And how to adjust that also we can even logically understand. Once again, we don't need to by heart it. If any income is there which is chargeable to tax under PGBP but not credited, what happened to the profit? Profit became lesser. So what we should do? We should add that to the profit which is already given in the question, which is accounting profit. So we should add such a type of income which was chargeable to tax but not credited. That should be added to the accounting profit. Same way, not chargeable to tax under this side of income but credited, like interest what we are talking about. So can we include that in PGBP? No. What we have to do? We have to exclude that. Means we have to deduct. Same way, there are some expenses deductible but not debited. So we have to deduct now if they have not debited already. On the other side, there are some non-deductible expenses but debited unnecessarily, because of which the profits have come down. Now we have to add. There it's a matter. This entire chapter is only about that. So it is a kind of reconciliation, between accounting profits and tax profits. But it is not easy just like that to reconcile. Point is, this chapter is about not much this also. What is chargeable to tax, what is not chargeable to tax, that is mostly evident. That is only one section, 28, that is enough. But this chapter is entirely about these two, which are deductible expenses, which are not deductible expenses. How do you know that? We don't know that. That is what this chapter of PGBP, and that is what section 30 to 37 is going to tell us. And in our example, if you remember, here 2000 was inadmissible depreciation but already debited to P&L. So what we did there? Added that 2000 so that we get PGBP according to Income Tax Act of 3,02,000. That's what we do. Like this, adjustments have to be done where required in order to find out the profits and gains of business or profession. And by the way, this method, what we are talking about, is called as indirect method. Indirect method. Mostly this is what we will use. Mostly. Direct method also can be used where you take only those incomes which are chargeable to tax, not worrying about P&L. Only take those expenses which are deductible according to Income Tax Act. Then you get PGBP. That is direct method straight away. So PGBP is directly calculated like this, as we already know. Incomes in the sense, once again, revenue here. So income is a word that is always used in different senses, but we have to understand when we say PGBP, that is a net concept, and revenue is a point or word that can be used for gross income, from which you have to allow deductions as per Income Tax Act under section 30 to 37. If allowed, we give them. If not allowed, we don't give them. Then what we get is PGBP. This is direct method, nothing new. This is how we calculate PGBP. If we know already what are the taxable things under 28 and what are the deductible things under 30 to 37. This is direct method. But indirect method is what? First we should look at the P&L account. Then we have to do adjustments according to these 4 principles. These are the 4 principles. According to them, adding, deducting, we will get PGBP. That is called indirect method. Both ways, whatever the way the question is asked, accordingly we have to respond. But ultimately, essence of this chapter, once again, resides where in the deductibility and non-deductibility of the expenses and losses, which are contained in 30 to 37, which are admissible deductions. Admissible deductions means allowed, deductions which are allowed. And there it will not stop. There are some more sections also we will see. 40 series is there. 40, 40A, 40A3, 40A2, 40A7 like that. Those will be inadmissible deductions. So the law itself will tell certain things are not admissible as deduction. We have to follow that section. So section 40 tells us that. Same way section 41 tells us about deemed profits. They also have to be considered as if they are PGBP under certain circumstances, even though the SSC is not owning the business at that time. Just like if you remember section 25A of past unrealized rent collected now, arrears of rent collected now, those are deemed, right, as income under income from house property. Same way, 41 tells certain items are considered as PGBP, deemed as profits under certain circumstances. What are those? We will look at them. And certain expenses are only allowed as deduction on payment basis. That is mentioned in 43B. These are various sections that we are going to learn here. Starting with charging section of 28, expenses of 30 to 37, inadmissible expenses of 40, deemed income or deemed profits of 41, and expenses which are allowed as deduction only on payment basis under 43B will give us computational aspects of PGBP. Computational aspects will generally end for our purposes with 43B. Generally that is enough. Of course there are other things like 43CA also. Those are special cases. Special situations. We will encounter them when we approach those sections. But in general, these are the crucial sections which will tell us whether a particular item of expenditure is deductible or not deductible. And according to those sections, we have to do these operations and find out how much is the PGBP after doing all these adjustments. That is the essence of this chapter in one way. But after computation of this PGBP, there are certain procedural aspects also. For example, maintenance of books of accounts is covered under 44AA. Same way, tax audit is covered under 44AB, and 44AD tells us presumptive income in some cases, like this ADA for professionals. 44AE is also there. So this 44 series is altogether a different species. We'll come to that later. That is after we know basically how to calculate PGBP according to the provisions of Income Tax Act. And these are the core sections that we are going to study. And we will directly go to them and understand them with common sense logic. Where requirement of memory is there, we have to apply memory, no doubt. For example, depreciation rates. There is no logic in that. There may be an underlying logic, but unless you by heart the depreciation rate, you don't have the capacity to use these rates for computation purposes. So definitely, where memory is required, we'll use that. Where logic is possible to be used, where we can just with common sense can understand, okay, this is the provision of the act also, and our common sense also tells the same thing. See, if our common sense and provision of the act both are telling the same thing, what is there to be specially remembered in that? Let us say, for just general discussion purpose, A hits B. A should be punished or not, if that is the question. Of course, he should be punished. We know that. That is our common sense, which says he should be punished. And law also tells that yes, he should be punished. But law will tell how many years, under what circumstances. Those all additional things will be told by law. But the essence we know already. That way, here also, deductible or not, yes or no. Certain expenses, yes, they will be deductible. But how much? And in what circumstances they are not deductible. Those things law will tell. Basic thing is common sense. And that is why, as I told already, with a P&L which is already prepared by accounts, there is nothing else to do if all these provisions are not there. So what are we going to do here in this chapter is apply the provisions of deductibility or non-deductibility of expenses and losses so that we find out the profits and gains of business or profession of different types of SSEs. Yes, this is the essence of it. But entire PGBP is not that. Definitely we need to know the individual specific provisions, which we will do in the coming classes. Till then, take care. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.